Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Carmelo Presicce, for being here today. And hello, everyone, for this. We're jumping in directly into this interview. We're talking about the future of education. I have today Carmelo. He is a researcher working for MIT right now. He's also you have like a master degree or something, or a PhD with MIT. And the main topic they're researching right now is learning and future of education. And I really like this, like this initiative called Lifelong Kindergarten Research Group, right? So it's like, how can we probably design a kindergarten as like, how can we actually integrate play into what we learn? So probably this is the topic. And I think we'll like dive into this. We'll talk a little bit about Scratch as well. You're also part of the team of Scratch. And then I would like to, discuss with you like what kind of assumptions do you have about the future of education? Where do you see this going? And that will be the main subject of the conversation today. So Carmelo, thank you so much. Grazie for like having you here today. Thank you so much and welcome to the summit.
Thank you, Vlad, and thank you for people listening to this. I'm excited to have this conversation today and talk about the present and the future of learning from the perspective that we have in the Lifelong Kindergarten Research Group. As you were saying, I'm very lucky to be a student in a PhD program at MIT, and I've been with the group for about 5 years now. And even starting from the name Lifelong Kindergarten says a lot about what is the vision, what are the values that we have as a research group. So my professor, Mitch Resnick, when he's asked like, what is the most important invention of the last millennia, he would say, some people would say the computer, internet, and of course technology has had a huge impact in people's life, right? But he would say it's kindergarten. And even the idea that kindergarten is an invention, right? And it is something that wasn't there before. And someone, Froebel in particular, came up with this idea of inventing spaces, contexts for learning, for kids to learn by expressing themselves through play, through tinkering, through exploring. I think all these ideas are definitely not obvious, and there is still much work to do to make learning. And he says like, when in kindergarten, people learn in this explorative and experimental way. And usually when people get to school, they start like filling worksheets or like sitting all day listening to lectures, right? So our vision of the future of learning in general, in particular with school, is a place that looks like more kindergarten. So we want to make the rest of school and the rest of life more like a kindergarten. And we do this in a variety of ways.
Yeah, just like I would like to like dig in and actually I would like to see some examples maybe of like ideas that you have or like things that you've tried, lessons learned, and something that you can share like, like with us or like everyone else right now. So yeah.
Definitely. I can tell you about like a couple of projects. Maybe before that, I would kind of like tell you a little bit more about what do we mean by creative learning. In particular, our research is about creative learning, and we define creative learning through this like 4 words that start with the letter P. So we call them the 4 Ps of creative learning, which is like projects, passion, peers, and play. You were mentioning play, right? It's one of the 4 pillars of our learning principles, basically. And so we say that people learn better when they're actively engaged in making projects. This project needs something that they care about, so they need to be connected with their passion, with their interest, like we talk about intrinsic motivation. And peers, like we believe that learning is a social endeavor, like it is situated and in context, in social context. And so we look at what are the different ways in which people can interact in a learning experience, and also play, which is more connected to a playful spirit in approaching learning. Sometimes we call it tinkering, just like trying things out, rather than talking about games or gamification. It's not that our focus. And then we try to apply these 4 principles to a variety of projects. So for example, Scratch that you mentioned before, it's one of the main, like most famous projects from our group, and is a programming language for children. Like it's a visual programming language. So people can create stories, animations, video games, by snapping blocks together, like it was like virtual Lego. So, and the entire design of Scratch, which is not only a programming language, but also an online community, the entire design is driven by these 4 P's. So how can we make sure that kids learn by making projects, right? On Scratch, people make and share projects. How can we make sure that it is kind of like the Scratch allows a wide variety of genres of things you can make, right? And how can we make sure that there are like bridges to kids' interest, right? And then like peers, like how do people collaborate in Scratch when they're working together on a project, or when they're inspired by someone else's work and maybe they remix it, right? Like starting from someone else's ideas and just like bringing it forward. And then like play, how can we ensure that Scratch is a playful platform in which like people feel free to make mistakes, feel free to just try things out to see what happens. And that's kind of like the approach that we have to coding, but in general to learning. So that like Scratch is one of the main projects. And I can tell you more about Scratch and more about other projects that I'm also more directly involved.
Yeah, please do. It's like I think so. So for us, Scratch is a brilliant idea. We had a nano degree in our school, and it was super well received by the kids. Amazing, right? So the kids, they really love it. And we are now thinking is like, and I remember our last conversation, it was how can actually you can use Scratch, or like how can we use Scratch to learn other things, not necessarily to learn programming, right? But how can you enable this platform or like this way of thinking but to learn other things? So do you have any ideas or some examples that you can give us like in this regard? Like how can you learn other things using maybe Scratch?
Yeah, thanks for bringing this up, because I think right now, Scratch has like, I don't know, last time I checked was like more than 40 million users, probably could be like even 50 at this point. And so it's been like the software has been like spread out very widely in this like last 13 years of Scratch. But like the ideas behind it are not always like received in the way we wish, right? And so how can we help educators and teachers and, like any adult who's like kind of introducing Scratch to children to do it in a way that resonates with our value? These are like very kind of hard and burning questions that we have right now in the lifelong kindergarten. And so I'm particularly working with teachers in a variety of projects. One of them is like an online course, which is free. It's called Learning Creative Learning. And during like, we run it like twice a year. So usually it's in the fall, October, November, and then in the spring, like April, May, most of the times. And through this like online course and community, we try to kind of like put a spotlight on what does it mean to learn through project, passion, peers, and play. And so every week we explore one of these aspects in depth. And we provide also a platform for teachers from all over the world to get together and to know each other. So in a way, learning creative learning is designed following the 4 P's of creative learning. So it is a creative learning experience also for people to join, right? And in that context, we explore different ways, not only to introduce Scratch to people, but just like any type of, like, people participate, you know, are teachers of any kind of like grade and backgrounds, any subject, you know, because these principles are universal, and we would like to see more of this in the design. Like teachers, like, and educators shift from the role being someone who kind of like gives lesson and transmits knowledge into learning experience designers. So people who need to create, to invent the context for this particular type of learning to happen. And so we kind of like guide them through, but also we allow space for people to learn from each other. So that is one way in which we're trying to address kind of like bringing the ideas along with the software, which is harder. And another project that I'm also involved in is more related to Scratch, is a series of workshops called We Scratch. We've been piloting this like last year, like in the beginning, like on 2019. And now we are on the 3rd or 4th iteration, but they're basically online workshops that are done using a video call software, where people, instead of just talking, they make Scratch projects together. And so with that, we try to model what does a kind of like a meaningful learning experience with Scratch look like, with people collaborating with each other, asking questions to each other, being in a context in which newcomers are super welcome, as well as like experts or people who are more familiar. So there are like, our goal is to create like inclusive, playful, and collaborative environments offline, but also online. So with that, we try to model what this type of learning can look like online too.
Can you go a little bit deeper on this? Because I think it's very similar with what we try to do, is like in a way in our clubs. But I would like to understand, is like, so practically you put kids together in groups in real time. They have Zoom meetings or something. They can be like how many kids in the same time, and they will build the same to help them, or do you just put 6 kids in a room and say, hey guys, build this project? How is it going? It's like, I explain
So,
a bit like.
Yeah, thanks for asking, so I can clarify a little bit. So right now, the We Scratch workshops that we offer are for teachers. And there is a variety of reasons, like they're for adults, basically, not necessarily teachers, like parents participate, like people who are interested in learning more about Scratch. And that has right now more to do with privacy concerns than with the learning design concerns, right? So in order to involve children in a learning kind of like research, it is more complicated. And also we believe that if we reach out to teachers, then they can apply the same models to their classrooms, to their children, like to their students, right? So that's the way in which we're currently officially focusing on educators. On the other side, like in my free time, I mean, before joining MIT, I was like, and I'm still part of this like movement of Coder Dojo coding clubs. They're free coding clubs for children. So I've been spending many years as a volunteer, like an organizer, having workshops with Scratch and other programming language for children. And now that the COVID pandemic hits, like the all Coder Dojo community, which counts like, I don't know, more than 5,000 clubs all over the world, had to transition online. So with the cities that I've been collaborating in the past in Italy, we've been also designing learning experiences that are inspired by the same principles of We Scratch, but they involve children. So to your question, like there's so many different ways to organize a session. We usually have like these 3 parts. In the first part, we all come together, and especially because like Scratch is also multi-language, it's a global community. So we just like start chatting for the first like 5 minutes just to create like an environment is like playful, you know, just that we ask like, what's the weather like in Thailand, or like people from South Africa join, you know, like it is very, very global. Then we start with introduction. So we never assume previous knowledge, right? This is important if you want to make something that's like inclusive. So people can jump in every session. And when people join, they will find, you know, like a very short introduction to what is Scratch, which is definitely not instructional. It's not a lesson. Like usually it's myself and another co-host. We just show how to make a super simple Scratch project in 5 minutes, you know, and say, okay, this is how you snap blocks together. There are a bunch of blocks, feel free to explore it, right? And then we provide a theme, and a theme is a creative theme. We never say, okay, now you take the sprite and create this like a square, or people in school we've seen like using Scratch in a very prescriptive way. We say, for example, today let's create an animation of our names, or today let's invent a story, or let's make I don't know, like an animation about for someone you care about, right? So, and all these kind of like activities are also freely available on the Scratch website. So we are reusing and retesting the activities and the Scratch cards, all learning resources that we already developed and that we want to promote. And so after this like short kind of like intro that to get everyone aboard, people move into breakout rooms. As you were saying, like 6 is actually a good number. Sometimes we try to be a little bit less, like 4 to 6 people. Usually we saw that works pretty well. So people have enough people to interact with, but also not too many so they can participate more actively. And we use a platform right now. It's called Hangout, which is free and open source, also developed at MIT, that is itself based on Jitsi, which is another open source video platform. And there is a characteristic of that video platform of Jitsi, which allows people to share their screens like simultaneously. So in every moment, I can click on each of my roommates and see what they're doing. And that enables a lot of like interactions, enables like people helping each other, say, hey, I'll show you where I am at, right? What is my challenge right now? Or sometimes just inspiration. Say, oh, I thought you were using a flying hippo in your project. Let me use it in a different way. Or so just like in kind of creating opportunities to share. And then in the third part, like after the breakout room, which is where people spend most of their time, we get back together because we believe that sharing as a whole group is an important part of any learning experience. And so we collect all the projects in what we call studios on Scratch. It's kind of a folder, a public folder where people can put all their projects. And as co-hosts, again, we just like pick some of them based on how much time we have. We usually try to encourage kind of to show a diversity of projects. You know, some are very complex, but also some are very simple because people are new, just to signal that everybody is welcome, right? And also we look inside the code of some of them, and we highlight some of the ideas that other people can find useful. So even the sharing part is a celebration, but is also a learning opportunity to share some ideas with others. And so again, we're still iterating on many of these aspects of the learning experience, but it is very promising. And also, we believe that the model can apply to other contexts that are not Scratch. Like you can learn a lot of things, any creative endeavor, even if you want to do creative writing or painting or anything, can benefit from this approach in which people come together, spend most of the time making and collaborating and sharing.
So the main goal, it seems to me like it's like to enable this creative thinking inside the participants. Like it's like participants, if they join, it's not necessarily learning Scratch. It's just like it's the process of creation. So you're joining here just to create something, and then you'll be probably motivated to do more learning about Scratch on your own at home. But you can't get like, I mean, you can do stuff like creation process with others like on your own. But if you learn Scratch on your own, and then once you have these meetings, probably weekly basis, then you can have some sort of nice experience where you can create and collaborate with other people. So that's kind of the main purpose for this.
Definitely. I think it is, there is not, it is about developing an interest in learning more, right? And I like what you highlighted. It is about the creative process that we care about, right? So to be comfortable in all the phases that involves creating something, like really anything, right? You usually, like, we call it the learning, the creative learning spiral, which is like an iterative process in which you start by imagining something, right? So maybe you're inspired by someone, but like you start with an idea, right? And then you create something. You see, like you start creating to make something, and then after you made something, you play, you tinker with it, like just you engage with it, and so after play there is like usually share. As I was telling you, like we really care about like sharing your idea with others so you can get feedback, or just like see what other people are sharing. And then there's a reflection part, which is something that like there is really no learning without reflection. So based on what you've done and what is outside, and your playing that you did by yourself and the sharing that you did with others, you start imagining what's next, right? You keep in this spiral of imagine, create, play, share, and reflect over and over. And again, this is not only related to Scratch. This is not only related to coding. Like any I don't know, a public artifact, anything that like humans do follow the same principles. So we want to be aware of how learning happens and design around it.
I really like this. And I see, for example, like this very useful for some of the things that we do. And I'll have a question for you. Maybe there is an answer here, because we have like two types of clubs. One is where actually the kids, they meet to create something, 3D modeling, stuff like this. It works perfectly, and I understand the entire process. But we have things like, for example, learning Spanish or learning Chinese, learning a language, right? Which is not necessarily a creative process, but how can we use this kind of principles, to, I'm not sure if you have this experience where like maybe have an idea about this, but I would like to know at least your point of view on this subject. So what do you think?
Yeah, so learning languages is something that, I'm personally interested in. Part of it is because, like programming languages have something to do with like, learning a language, but also because like being Italian and being English a second language, I was, involved in learning a new language. And that's something that also, I live in Boston, and on Saturdays, I usually volunteer as a teacher or helper into a school for small Italian, like for kids who have like their family is Italian and they want to keep the language or learn. So I'm very interested in language learning. And I can give you an example of something that happened to me like a couple of weeks ago, actually. Like most of the times, like people spend a lot of time learning grammar or learning like spelling, in school. And that's certainly something that's very important, right? But when I think about the 4 P's of creative learning, I think about like, how can we create a context in which it is meaningful for children to speak Italian, right? Or to any language, How can I make them wanting to speak? And so something happened like very organically. We didn't plan for it. But one of the days, like one of the kids came in with some stickers, and they were like stickers of food. Like there was like I don't know, like there was a pizza sticker, there was a fries sticker, and stuff like that. And children started to like put them there, and they were drawing a restaurant, right? And so the teacher was like, okay, enough playing now, we start the lesson. I was like, wait a minute, tell me more about this restaurant. How does it work? And so the kids starting very, very excited to show me like what they were selling, you know, what was the menu. And I was like, started asking questions, right? Okay, but where is the menu? I want to see what it is. And it's an Italian restaurant, right? So I expect that the things are written in Italian, right? And then like, when is it opening? Is there a, I don't know, like a flyer that I can see if I can come, you know? And so they started working on a flyer. And then when it was open, all the kids, like some of the kids were customers, and they were like the waiters, and they were just like going around and asking in Italian, you know, what would you like to order? We don't have this. What is the price? So playing with numbers. Again, to me, that is an example of something that emerged, right? Just for this little thing, you know, like I was like, kind of like, I saw that could lead to somewhere. I didn't know where, but it was definitely something that was like close to their interest in that moment. Not that doesn't mean that their passion is like creating a restaurant, but in that moment that was meaningful. And so building on any little hint that the kids can give you about what they want to do, just creating a learning experience around it. And it's not always easy. You know, this was a very successful story. Everybody was involved. We had a lot of fun, and there was a lot of writing involved, which we wanted to, and a lot of talking involved. Sometimes, you know, it's harder, but always keeping in mind, like, what can be a project? How people are interacting among peers? How can this be connected to their interests? And how can be a playful experience for everybody? That can happen really with everything.
This is really brilliant right now. I can see, you know, like for example, our kids, they sometimes they design a business, right? So they have to design a business, and I can see them like, you know, we are introduced together by Josemar, right? So I can see, you know, how can we explain to them, like, you want to tap into the Spanish market, then you need to present your product or whatever you're building in Spanish. So then, you know, this is a pretty big market, and then I can understand, you know, exploring this. I think this example, like how can you introduce project-based learning to languages? It's a very interesting idea. Thanks for sharing this. How can we, I mean, any experience, like how can you enable actually using Scratch maybe?
Yeah, we also do kind of like a lot of like workshop. And again, like when we do Scratch, we keep it, as I was saying, the prompt very wide. We never say now you do, you know, kind of like a project. We don't want, like, one of the criteria to evaluate ourselves as designers is like how diverse was the outcome. Like if kids end up doing all the same project, it means that we didn't do a good job in showing the variety of possibilities. So we didn't allow them to express themselves fully, right? So we always like try to give a variety of examples of things, but also just like encourage them to explore, because it is about them. It is about something that should matter to them. And so, you know, even when I give you this example of the business, like it's just like, just by chance that happened to be that, right? It could have been something else based on what they were currently interested in. So always keeping in mind that should be something that starts from them. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And you said these workshops are designed like you can pop in, pop out like whenever you want, right? So like you don't have to participate like 6 events in a row or something. You can join one weekend, hasta luego, right? So I would like to understand, right? Like if for you is important to measure, you know, it's like if people are like constantly coming to these events and have kind of like, you know, some sort of, you know, you help them develop some sort of habit, you know, to participate on a weekly basis to these events and just like and create this habit, right, of learning with some sort of self-learning and then meeting once a week to do some like creating together. So what do you think about that? So like, I mean, what's your perspective experience on this?
Yeah. So So we offer these workshops, you know, like a couple of times a year, but and we keep experimenting with other similar experiences. I think for me, it's particularly interesting from the designer perspective. Like, how can we make this session self-contained in a way that everybody can join at any time? I think is important. And the other important part is like, how can we make these learning environments good for everybody? And, you know, like there is a tendency and also a natural instinct in dividing people into beginners who will be with the beginners and advanced will be with advanced and, you know, like intermediate or whatever. Like our design choice is very deliberate in putting people together. Sometimes there are some aspects that make it a little bit harder, right? But like with that, creating an environment in which people with different experience can learn together, that also means that the activity needs to be wide enough and open-ended enough for experts also not to be bored, like they can express themselves, right? And at the same time, that allows people to come back. Even if today we're doing the animation of the name, we did it like in the 6 months ago in the similar like series of workshop. People can come back and try something different, something more complex, or be inspired by new people they will meet, right? So just designing experiences that are repeatable, it means that they're rich. It means that, you know, I'm not done scratch and a checkbox. You're never done scratch, like you're never done talking to people, right?
Yeah, we're
Done.
JavaScript or something. It's a continuous learning
Yeah, there's
process.
always something new you can learn. There's also something like about the social context that is new and so can inspire you in a different way.
Yeah, we're also thinking a lot about, you know, peer-to-peer learning. And that's something else I'd like to explore with you, right? So we see some very interesting things happening in our school. Like, you know, some kids will say, I want to learn Chinese. And some other kid will say, I can help you learn Chinese. And where sometimes I want to learn something, oh, I want to learn that thing too. And sometimes maybe this kind of, you know, this kind of ways to learn together are actually probably, in my mind, like could be better than, you know, just having a program specially designed for them or something. So what do you think about, you know, this kind of following your curiosity and kind of finding your learning peers? And it's like, do you have any experience on this? Like, how is it going in your world?
Yeah, I think it is wonderful when, you know, like the fact that people are like following their interests, you know, and like deciding like very deliberately that they want to deepen a certain understanding of something. And also that they wanted to do it together, like among peers. That's definitely something that many times is like one big factor of motivation. Like my friend is learning this thing. I think it's fun to be with my friend. It will be fun to learn this stuff together, right? One thing that I've seen sometimes just like it's taken a little bit too lightly is that we just put kids together and they will figure it out. Unfortunately, it's not that easy, right? So I think kids deserve some help that comes into the form even like of like helping with the structure of the learning activity, you know, like or like adults like play different roles. Sometimes we are collaborators, sometimes we are consultants, you know, sometimes we just like take different roles, but like not abandoning the students. I think that is something that I'm skeptical when I hear like, you know, people will figure it out by themselves. I have like a huge kind of like faith and trust in kids' potential, but I also recognize that people who have more experience in life or expertise can help providing structures within the kids can explore freely. So the question is like how to learn to design structures that are somehow liberating or somehow just like leading to a rich learning experience. It is very different from like abandoning students or over controlling them. there is a balance there.
It's a nice balance. Well, another thing you mentioned, right, about the levels of, like, you put together different people at different levels, right? So I agree, this can help, for creativity. But if you want to have, like, to achieve performance in a subject. So, for example, you're learning 3D modeling, and if you're a beginner, you're using a program like, I don't know, Thinker or something. But if you're a pro, then you go Blender and other things, right? So what do you think is, like, it's like, I mean, if you keep them together, pros and beginners, then the pro, they can have different perspective regarding creativity, but they will not have necessarily performance, like they cannot improve their skills in Blender. So how do you envision this kind of things? Like, right, like, because it's kind of like, I see the benefit, but I see also a downside. So
definitely. I think it touches on the learning agency that we were talking about, right? So when first of all, like, even though we encourage people to work in, in groups that are very heterogeneous, we never force anything. So especially the way in which breakout rooms work, to give you an example, in WeScratch, you can see, like, people choose in which breakouts to go. And they can see who else is in the room. So sometimes I just decide to go there because there is a person that's, like, at my level, and I enjoy, like, just like being with them and learning with them on the same, because we share similar interests, right? So, but also we want to provide, context in which someone can decide, like, today I want to just, like, focus on more helping others, or today I want to be with this person who's, like, very expert, and I want to ask them a specific question, right? So and also, like, this happens in the context of a workshop that is definitely just a small part of the learning journey of people. We also try to get people in touch. So if you and I meet randomly in a breakout room, then we have each other's email. And if we decide that we are both interested in this extra project, or, like, exploring this other programming language, we have the agency to decide that next Wednesday we meet and we just keep playing with this other thing, right? So always, like, providing alternative opportunities to people. It's always something to keep in mind. So learning doesn't happen only when we are designing learning experiences. It's broader than that, and we should be aware of that, and just, like, providing opportunities for people to connect and learn together whenever they want and whatever they want.
Man, thank you so much. We're approaching the closing here, but I have some questions, and I would like to discuss with you about what are your main assumptions about the future of education. And I think, I mean, you mentioned the teacher role is changing dramatically, right? From transferring the knowledge to someone, like, designing the experience. And it's a big shift, right? So it's a really big shift. And then if this will happen, how do you envision the schools of the future, right? Like, what is actually a school, like, and what kind of experiences they should create, and in order to, enable this kind of collaboration and working and learning experience.
Yeah. Like, it's hard to make predictions, but I can tell you what I wish.
More like assumptions,
right?
So let's not call
it as an assumption. I would say, as assumptions, I would say, like, we I think we believe in this vision of a creative society. Like, we know that the world is changing very fast, very rapidly. Like, and this is a problem, like, not being able to make prediction. Like, we don't know what would be important for children to know in the future, right? So how do you respond to that need? Like, for us, it is all about developing people as creative thinkers, like, as developing people who are able to adapt to changing conditions, and not only developing skills, which are important, but just, like, being comfortable with that process of, like, coming up with some ideas, like inventing things and collaborating together. I think that is something that's very important, like, for us. and for me in particular, was like studying like the social context, offline, online, but learning is a social endeavor. I imagine kind of like a future in which people come together, and make together rather than do it yourself. We say like, make it together. It's what we envision. And especially with technology, there are big risks of having algorithms that decide for you what is the best personalized learning for you. We believe more in the power of humans coming together, just like, and going beyond what is like strictly the knowledge, cognitive aspect of learning, and more like thinking of like socially, emotionally, like as human beings, what is learning like, what does learning looks. And that of course means that the system will change. There's no doubt that the system will change. In which direction does it change? That depends on us, right? If it goes more into kids sitting in front of a computer, just like learning as like, I don't know, learning jujitsu like in Matrix, versus like people just like spending time together, developing relationships and building on that relationships to grow as human beings, to develop an appreciation for learning and for life, and to be joyful, fulfilled person. That is what we are working toward.
Man, thank you so much. Really inspiring conversation today, Carmelo. I will ask you after this meeting about the links. Maybe you can provide the links for, I think these links can be useful for both parents, I understand, and teachers, right? If they want to understand more about how to become and transform their like teaching lives into like a experience designer, right? So like into learning experience designer. Actually, I like this term. And yeah, I will provide these links in kind of like in this webinar when we're watching. Thank you so much, Carmelo, once again, and hope to see you around. So thank you so much for this.
Thank you, Vlad, and thank you to everyone who's been watching this.
Thank you. Bye.